Welcome back to the Trekway podcast. I'm Trev. He's Gray, or he might be on that side.
Yeah,
I think he's on that side for me though. Am
at
I?
one
Am
of
I
those
on that side?
sides.
Am I on that side for
I
you?
don't know.
Where am
I don't know. I'm on Discord. I can't tell.
I?
Is my TTW the right way? Yeah, I'm sure it is.
I don't
Right.
know. But yeah, I think it probably is. No,
Yeah.
we're around for an hour or so. We've got an interesting topic and a special. We're going to do because in a couple of weeks' time, a few weeks' time, we've got Discovery season 5 coming back. So we might squeeze in another one before,
Yep.
possibly. I might want to try and do a live recording test, Gray, so that when we do the reviews, we'll just do them live. Because if someone wants to jump in and add a comment to it and engage in a conversation, it might be a cool idea to chat to other Trekkies about it.
Watch party.
No, not watch party. They'll watch live. I'll literally do live YouTube, and someone might jump in and say hi and say you're talking shit, Trev, or you're talking so much sense, Gray, or something along those lines. So, but we'll get back.
Unless we both watch Star Trek at the same time.
No,
go live.
I like to watch it purely focused on my own, and then I could watch it a second time and do it that way, you know. So yeah, we'll get about an hour or so to do a little special because Gray's got a hot date that he needs to dive off for. No, I'm only kidding. He's a busy chappy, so we'll get about an hour or so. So the special we thought we'd do today, and I've been putting it off for a little while because I'm lazy and it needs a little bit of research, is Star Trek's effect on society. Now that sounds like something you would do at a dissertation at university or something, you know. Give me a white paper or something. Your professor was saying you have to write something deep and philosophical and meaningful. But
Which means falling asleep after the first 10
no,
minutes.
we'll make it interesting. No,
Oh no, not us. I'm talking about if you wrote a white paper.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We always make it interesting. That's the whole point. When I was going to do this idea for the pod, Gray, be honest, were you a little bit hesitant? Do you think it was a great idea, or do you think, damn, what am I going to talk about? This is far too deep for me.
Yeah, no, because I've lived this whole thing. This is not the first time I've talked about Star Trek's effect on society. They've been talking about this for the last 20 years or more.
True, this is true.
Yeah.
We'll try and do it justice. Really quickly though, get the paperwork quickly out of the way. You guys are probably aware by now that as well as YouTube, we're on YouTube podcast platform as well, which is Google. I think it's moving from Google Podcast to YouTube soon, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And any other audio podcast that you listen to, you can listen to us there instead of on the video if you want. Gray's got a lovely Star Trek mug, not the Trekway one, so that's okay. Oh, for feck's sake.
Special.
Stefan here. Why does Spock? Why does how many ears does Shatner have? Do you remember that joke? I told you before. The left ear, the right ear, and the final front ear.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry. That's it. Everyone's tuning out now.
I walked into that one.
Yeah, so as well as the podcast platforms as well, Gray's got a show as well called Gray's Green Room, which is the exact same setup as mine. It's about entertainment industry, the shenanigans that goes on with it, as well as reviewing and opinions on TV shows, movies that are all popular and some unpopular as well. And that's about once a month. We'll probably be doing another episode of that in a week or two. And you can find him at Gray's Green Room on all the good YouTube and podcast platforms. And last but not least, our colleague and friend Nick at Extreme Gaming Podcast. The reason I mention that is if you like Star Trek, then there's a decent chance you like gaming as well, which means you can come along to our Discord, which is in the description. It's got all of our rooms in there. It's got the Trekways in there, Gray's GGR entertainment rooms in there, and it's gaming centric and everything else as well. And we do a weekly gaming show as well. So if you like one or any of those things, please come along to Discord. That's the main thing. And say hi. Pop into one of the rooms to say hi. But we'll kick on. Great. So we don't want to bore people too much. We're a bit biased when it comes to this subject, understandably. But I try to be a little bit unbiased. Of course I do. I try to see both sides of the coin, even though I love this so much. I've loved Star Trek for a long, long time, ever since I was a wee lad. And I didn't properly start getting into Star Trek, really, though, until probably Deep Space Nine, Voyager, that kind of era, even though I was around, obviously, for the Next Generation special later on. It's just that when I was really, really small, it wasn't my thing. It's more when I was a teenager. I remember I was starting to watch Voyager while I think I stayed in my own place when I was 16, and I was able to watch these episodes ahead of everyone else. I watched Endgame at a Star Trek convention in Blackpool, England, a week before anyone else in the UK saw it, because this was the States will get it first because it's their show, and then everywhere else will get it like weeks or months later. That was the case then as well, so there was no streaming, no same day or next day. And I've loved it ever since. Obviously, Voyager's my favourite show, but part of the reason we love Star Trek Grey is because, whether you like it or not, it's had a massive effect on society. Massive. I'm not going to say necessarily more or less than Star Wars, because that was epic as well for kind of slightly different reasons. But Star Trek is arguably, I'm not going to say the biggest, because of course it's not, but it's arguably one of the biggest franchises of all time. You've got to agree with that much, taking your Star Trek hat off, Gray. Yeah.
I mean, basically, if you go all the way back to even before you were born, I was watching TOS when it was first on when I was young.
You remember the first run, though. You remember the first run of it.
Oh, yeah. I watched the first run, yep. And I wasn't very old. But the good thing of Star Trek, though, as a whole, if you were going to count the entire, 60-year span, then I would say more people have seen Star Trek over the time than Star Wars or most anything else.
Yeah.
And I'm not just blowing smoke. It's true. Yeah. And it has made a very big impact on science fiction in general. And not that science fiction didn't exist. It's been existing since Jules Verne, who I used to read all the time.
Yeah, but it was the crappy stuff with the little crappy rocket ships and the really, really, really bad.
Yeah, as far as when it came to movies or TV, well, back then it was the only thing you had. You thought
the Enterprise going along was bad with the drunk guy, with the puppeteer. There was sci-fi before that was like the guy had been on a week-long bender before he started doing his puppet work. It was bad.
Exactly. But even back then, and like I said, it's all relative, because when you're going back then and that's the only special effects they had, and you've never seen anything like that before, it's all like,
did you think it was wild when you saw the Enterprise go along? Did you okay, be honest, I know you were younger then, but you watched that and you thought, cool, I like sci-fi, this looks cool. But did you not at the same time go, is the guy been on the alcohol for the weekend before he started filming or something? Like, was he... It looked bad. It looked bad. Did you not think it's great, but what's going on? No? Okay.
No, not in the least. Because like back then when Trek came on TV, there were no special effects like that good on TV until Trek came around. There just wasn't. So when Trek came around, it's kind of like, whoa, what's this? And everything looked... Because the only thing we had before that, maybe, or whatever, or almost the same time as Lost in Space, the original show, which I also liked a lot until it became really dumb the last year. But anyway, the point is that the effects were really good on that one too, for what we have never seen. Yeah. And then all of a sudden Trek took that effects level up a notch, so it was even better than Lost in Space at the time. So, I mean, it was just, I know I never thought that at all. Now I can look back and say that now only because of how good the effects have gotten since then. Same thing like we always kid around when we're talking about gaming. I mean, there's 8-bit and 16-bit and 32-bit, and then they started getting, and now there's Unreal Engine 5. So it's gone a long, long way. But when I first saw it and it was all brand new, I was like jaw-dropping. We're just like, wow.
Did you wonder how he done it? Did you wonder how the Enterprise, like, what it was done practically? Did you think as a...
Well, not as much, because when I was watching the original series, when it first aired, I was only 10 years old. So, so I'm not going to get too much into how they actually did it. I just couldn't believe what I was watching. And everything about it, I mean, the whole thing was structured differently, it was written quite differently. I mean, there was literally nothing really on TV that was anything like it that came before it. I mean, the closest you could say was as good or groundbreaking as Trek would be Twilight Zone. And so all the Twilight Zones and the Outer Limits. So when you start really talking about great shows back then, it's Outer Limits, it's Twilight Zone, it's Star Trek. Those three really influenced a lot of stuff. In fact, some of the things that Gene Roddenberry came to do in Trek was influenced by Twilight Zone.
And westerns as well.
Westerns, right.
And here I thought you were about at least 30 or 40 when you watched TOS the first time around.
Oh no, no,
He wouldn't
no.
be with us anymore, ladies and gentlemen, if that was the case. That was a long time ago, if that's the case.
Well, when I was younger, I always remember the third season. I think I've said this before, but the third season of Star Trek, they decided they were going to put it on late because before that was on like at 8 p.m.
And you weren't
Remember,
allowed to
there's
stay up.
Exactly. So when it came on at 10 o'clock on Friday night, I had to sit there and really try to make a case to my
Please,
parents.
Mom.
Like, come on, let me stay up. And the only reason I actually won that one was because the next day was Saturday and it wasn't school.
I'll do the dishes for the next week. I put her on promise, please.
Exactly. So I'm just I'm going like, come on, tomorrow's Saturday. I don't have to go to school.
But your parents were
right.
Trekkies as well, no? Or at least one of them. Sure.
I mean, not really. My dad kind of liked it but he wouldn't go out of his way to watch it. But when he did, he liked it.
You were the diehard.
Like
no brothers or siblings or anything that enjoyed it.
Nah,
Just you.
brother wasn't into it. Sister wasn't into it.
That's
Mom wasn't
shame,
into
man.
it.
That's a shame. Oh well. Right, you were.
However, but here's the story about how Trek was so influential. Despite the fact that half my family didn't really care about it, they all knew who Mr. Spock was with the pointed ears and stuff. They all did. They all knew it.
Yeah.
And they didn't even watch the show. It was like
that.
So it just shows you.
That's the second part of the first point we had noted down here, that it's a massive part of pop culture. Yeah. Gray's just literally said it there. His family knew who the guy was with the pointy ears, even though they didn't know a hell of a lot about Star Trek. Even my mother, my mother would, because she knows I'm Star Trek daft, so she hears a lot of things about that. But everyone knows who that guy is, just like everyone knows who Yoda is from Star Wars, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Now, here's an interesting thing, and I'm not surprised by that. George Lucas, yes, that guy, once said, and I quote, "Star Trek softened up the entertainment arena so that Star Wars could come along and stand on its shoulders," end quote. Now, it is a great quote, Gray, as you note down here, but it's also a compliment and a bit of a kick up the arse at the same time, because he's saying, thank you, Star Trek, you allowed me to be able to pull off what I did, but I'm just going to literally and figuratively stand on your shoulders to get above you. And in some ways, more people prefer Star Wars than they do Star Trek. And I won't get into that whole debate. That's maybe a pod on its own. I don't dislike Star Wars, but I don't love it either. I watched every Star Wars once and only ever once. I wouldn't go back and watch them again. I don't go back and watch many shows again, to be fair, Gray. Not even Star Trek, but if I'm going to watch the odd episode again, it would be Star Trek.
Sure.
But one's based on fantasy, because Star Wars is not science fiction, it's fantasy. It's got sci-fi elements too, of course it does. Hyper speed and all that kind of stuff, and lightsabers, there's some science there, but it is mostly fantasy. Star Trek is based on science fiction, and that's what we're going to get into in this as well, because many things were influenced by Star Trek, and I'm proud to say that that's one thing that Star Wars hasn't got, really. And when you think of the classic spaceship in just in general, doesn't matter what genre it is, across the board, you're thinking the Enterprise. Again, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, Gray, like your parents would have known what the Enterprise was, even if they didn't know how fast you could go, all these kind of geeky details that you and I know. And it's even more iconic, dare I say it, than the Millennium Falcon or Babylon 5? Is it the most iconic starship for you?
Right. Well, like I've always known, it's not just a matter of being iconic for being iconic. It's also how long was it iconic? And you're talking 60 years of it being iconic. And as soon as an Enterprise pops up, everybody just goes, "Oh, that's the." Even if they're not really well versed in Star Trek, they look at it and go like, "Yeah, that's the."
It's got the same kind of shape, doesn't it? So even if it's the E, they go, "Yeah, that's an Enterprise."
Right. So they can even look at it, not know the name of it, maybe, but they'd still know it when it pops up on screen.
Yeah.
It's almost like back then, and even today, when people talk about flying saucers, it's pretty easy. It's a round thing that and so everybody knows what a flying saucer is. Well, I would dare say that the Enterprise has become almost synonymous as the flying saucer over all these years.
Flying saucers are not bloody practical. I've always hated them. You never seen any engines on them ever, and it pissed me off.
It was easy to do because they were just going like, well, cylindrical, and it flies, like a frisbee or something, and boom. And it has its place in science fiction history, and that's all good. But when the Enterprise came around, it just broke the mold. Everybody was sitting there going like, you had to have something shaped like a rocket, or you had to have something shaped like a
Yeah.
flying saucer,
Yep.
or something along those lines. It was the same thing. It was just normal to see that. So when the Enterprise came out, it was kind of like, whoa, what's this thing? It's not a saucer. It's not a any other kind of rocket-looking thing. It's just, I mean, by all rights, it shouldn't even have done as well as it did because it's just something so out there compared to what everybody was used to. And
Yep.
yet when they saw it, they just went, yeah, now we're talking. So, and everything just grew out of that. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I mean, we always say that the Enterprise is part of the cast.
It's
not
the main.
just
It's the main.
the
It's the main
actors.
star of the show, even more than Shatner.
Right.
It's the main star of the show, and people,
Right.
many
Especially
people
in
have
the
said
early
that.
days.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And even in the later series and stuff like that, which is and when they started to get away from some of that in some of the other newer shows and whatnot, then I think that suffered. It suffered for that.
Seeing sci-fi, Gray, the ship is always the main character, right? And without getting too deep into this, some of my favorite Star Trek episodes is when the ship, whatever ship it is involved a lot. Whether I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Voyager, Timeless, season 5, episode 1, I think it's the one where they crash on the ice planet just outside the Alpha Quadrant. They use that slipstream, but it goes wrong. Harry, Kim, and Chakotay are ahead, and the Delta Flyer trying to map things ahead. And you see a lot of the CGI budget being used up. They're trialing new, they're trialing new forms of propulsion. There's a lot of beautiful CGI. I mean, the effect when it lands in the snow, and its nacelle gets ripped off. I'm a teenage Trev watching this, going horrified and equally entertained because that's my baby. I love Voyager, and it's getting absolutely ripped a new one. But Grey and I's, we've got a special that we've done way back at the start, actually. That's what our favourite starships are. Okay, now spoiler alert: mine is the Defiant, and Grey's is the Enterprise refit / Enterprise A. My second favourite ship is the Enterprise refit / A because they're the same. They look bloody the same, regardless of what anyone says.
Yeah, they're
the original. I don't dislike. I understand the limitations of the time, so I'm not going to count it. I'm not going to count against it, but it's not my favourite for that reason because it was so bland compared to the motion picture. That looked absolutely stunning when you actually made the nacelle sleek. That's one of our favourite ships, and that says it all because, again, it is the Enterprise. Every Enterprise has almost been gorgeous. The B and the C were probably the ugliest ones, and I'm not... I have to, if I have to.
Oh, and even they weren't that ugly.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. But if you have to put them at the bottom, they are probably at the bottom. I'd probably say the A, the E, the D, the F, and then probably we're going like B and C. I don't know which is the ugliest. Probably the C. Probably the C. Then what was the C? The Ambassador class, and then the B was the. Intrepid, is it Intrepid? No, not Intrepid.
It looks more like the Excelsior, but not
Excelsior class.
But not exactly.
Yeah, but that class is Excelsior.
Yeah.
So that was a nice ship. You see why they jumped ahead, because they had to jump ahead in time. Plus, these two ships were not quite the same as the other ones. So it's iconic starship. That's what we're trying to say when it comes to Star Trek, and it will be probably for the rest of time, to be honest with you. Fun little fact: some people will know this, some people won't. Your man Gene Roddenberry named. I mean, listen, if Terry Metalis is Jesus, then Gene Roddenberry is God. It's fair, isn't it? It's fair. He named the Enterprise after the U.S. Navy carrier of the same name, which served. I actually thought it was the other way around. I thought the Enterprise was actually based on Star Trek, but then if you look back to your history, the Enterprise goes way, way, way back to sailing ships. But yeah, so he names it after the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier that served for 51 years, and that's the third longest of all time. Not third longest aircraft carrier, it's the third longest ship in U.S. Navy history of all time. It's the longest serving aircraft carrier, and the thing was in service from like the 50s onwards. The thing was iconic. It went on so long. I watched a documentary on it recently, actually, Gray, and it is a fantastic ship. To be fair, now you mentioned here. In fact, I'll let you talk. So you're talking about prototype space shuttles here.
Right. When they were developing the space shuttle years ago, they obviously had to have a prototype first to fly around and test a little bit. And there was a whole thing about when the prototype came out that what should the prototype be named? And there was a huge letter writing campaign from all the Star Trek fans. You have to name it Enterprise. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were gonna do that, but when they saw the deluge, and then they started thinking, all right, well, this is a good PR opportunity. What the heck,
Yeah.
people. And so they went ahead and named it Enterprise. A bunch of the cast members of Star Trek, the TOS series, was there when they dedicated it. And there you go, another Enterprise. So that was pretty cool for a television show to get their name on a real space shuttle. Now, nobody else can say that. You don't see a Millennium Falcon space shuttle flying around.
Thank God.
Or anything like that. So, that's just another accolade and a feather in the cap for Star Trek.
Yeah, because Millennium Falcon was completely made up as far as I'm aware, whereas the Enterprise was based in something, so fair is fair.
Right.
I'd forgotten about that, Gray. I'm glad. There's a couple of points Gray noted down here that I thought I covered everything. Obviously not. Gray's remembered about a couple of things, and that didn't go to space, that ship, unfortunately. No. That was the really sad thing.
Well, the thing that I was hoping for was I thought that they might name another shuttle later in the program Enterprise, like Enterprise 2 or whatever. And I really thought that would happen because, we had one prototype. Now we should go ahead and name one that actually flew, into space. But they never did, which disappointed me because I wanted to see it. But I think they were stuck on the fact that every ship had to have a different name.
Yeah.
So whatever, it's fine. The point is that the first one came around and it was Enterprise. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I would like. This is what brings me on to my next point, which Elon Musk could possibly do this, but even SpaceX have been heavily influenced by Star Trek. I think Elon Musk is a Trekkie. If he's not admitted as much, he's got to be, surely to God, because Starship is. I've never seen Starship, the term Starship being used outside Star Trek. I know it's a generic word, but we'd say spaceship. We wouldn't say Starship. Right. So he names the latest rocket Starship, which I hope you guys watched the launch on Thursday. Gray and I did, and it covered most of its tasks, and it was beautiful to see. It really was. So he's named that Starship. His base is Starbase. I mean, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Starbase 1, the original. He's got one of his buildings is Stargate or Homeworld Command or something like that. So
that part I didn't know. Yeah,
that he's using other parts of the franchise. He's like, he has to turn the front door into a circle. He has to turn it into a ring, man.
And you gotta have the ring spin around before you get in. How do we get in? Well, let's see. Let's get the chevrons right.
Yeah, make sure you get the last chevron correct. Otherwise, you could just end up in the wrong meeting. He's named things after Star Trek, sci-fi in general. There's a Mars building or Mars base as well. He's got several buildings, so this is great that he's naming things after that. Of course he does. And I love what SpaceX are doing. That's another thing we could maybe do a special on SpaceX and Star Trek or something down the line. So many things have been influenced by Star Trek, and we'll talk about several more as well. But technology-wise, Gray, this is important. This is possibly one of the biggest effects Star Trek's had in society. Whether it's a subconscious thing or a conscious thing, many items and technologies have been inspired by Star Trek, and I'll of course give some examples. The mobile phone, certainly the earlier flip phones. They couldn't contact space, but now they could with Starlink, which is cool. But that's influenced by it. Tablets, your iPads and stuff. In fact, if you look at the tablets that they use in the next generation, they look like massive Fisher-Price chunky boys, whereas we're actually surpassed that now. They're like less than half the thick. I wonder how they've done that with the tablets, actually, the Star Trek tablets, Gray, because they had things moving on them. I wonder how they've done that, actually. That's interesting.
Oh, back then, the special effect guys knew how to do all kinds of strange things.
Yeah, they are the geniuses, true geniuses behind Star Trek.
I mean, look at the
Translators.
did you see the model of the Enterprise that was recently restored a few years ago? That's at the
The
museum. How much work
Smithsonian's
they put into
museum.
that?
The
Yeah,
yeah.
but they went back to restore it, and it was painstaking because they had to go through each thing. They had to make sure all the lights were put in the right places and worked again, and la la la. Like it's like wild.
Uh,
And now there's not full scale, but there's models you can get out there. They're expensive, but they are like 3 foot long models, and these things are massive with all the lights and the whole
oh,
dealy
great! I'd
hoo.
love that. I'd absolutely love that. Oh.
I know you have to have your own bedroom for it.
Like Fan Home, the guys that kind of took over
Yeah.
from who done the models before? I've forgotten now. They are going to bring out Star Trek models later this year, and I am on their waiting list. I can't wait.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's a good point, Gray. But we have other things as well. Translators, they're almost at the level that
Mhm.
Star Trek is in terms of at least languages in our planet. I don't think they can listen to a language they've never heard and be on the ball. But Google are at the forefront of that one, Gray. They'll have like
Right.
buds and stuff and headphones in general that can listen to another language and literally play it back into your ears straight away. As well as things like Google
Right.
Lens, that where you could scan, say something in Japanese, and it'll give it straight back to you in English. So we're almost at that stage
And a
there.
lot of that's all it's all happening now. I didn't think the translators were going to come as soon as they did.
Yeah,
I was thinking the translators were going to take another however many years. But I was really surprised that the ones now where you can basically speak into it and it pretty much pops it out the other end really quick.
it's amazing.
And I'm
It's
like,
amazing.
wow.
Yeah. There's many other things like I'll just briefly touch on, but I won't go into too much depth. Like the hypo spray is almost at the level where it can be sprayed through the skin. They're so close to that, not quite yet, but they're almost there. They've even managed to do transporters technically from like atoms from one end of the room to the other. They've managed to do things like that. And we know warp drive is technically possible. It's theoretically possible. And of course, that will be hundreds upon hundreds of years before we see that, if we see that. But these things have been inspired for people to continue looking into what we can actually do. So that's just a few items. There's obviously more, but we just thought we'd discuss a few of them first and
If you
foremost.
think about it, what's interesting about that is when we're all long gone, right? When they finally do create something like warp drive or close to something like warp drive, they're going to end up going back and mentioning Star Trek again, which at that time will be like maybe a couple hundred years before, or whatever.
Well,
I can easily see that.
see if they whatever FTL drive they invent, right?
Hmm.
They have to call it warp drive regardless. Like, I mean,
I would hope so. I mean,
well,
it
saying
just
that warp drive is warp drive. I'm not going to bore people to tears with what warp drive is, but there is technically more than one way of traveling faster than light. The warp drive thing is technically possible because the ship isn't actually going at warp itself. It's the bubble around it. It stretches space in front of it and expands it behind it, and it's the bubble that's actually doing it. That's why you can kind of cheat physics, because technically nothing can go faster than the speed of light. You're not. It's space itself. So that's the bit that's technically possible. So if they invented something else that wasn't, that's not technically warp drive. However, just call it warp drive, man. And if they have weapons at some point and they develop high enough powerful lasers, don't call them lasers, call them phasers. Just do everything. We get to this later on. Galaxy Quest is a great example of this. It's based kind of on Star Trek, where aliens watch the show and they think it's all real, and the actors are like, behave yourself, we're actors. That's genius. Just name everything after it. But yeah, NASA, Gray's not too far away from several of their buildings, to be fair. He's in the same state as them. They are a massive example of this one. The US government obviously puts quite a bit of money into them. A lot less than it used to, but, we've got other priorities in life as well.
unfortunately, that's another story.
Yeah, you can't start putting 10-20% of your total budget into space exploration. As cool as that is, people got to eat and survive and all that good stuff, but
We'll
still
do
put a lot
another
in.
show on that one, but they could be putting quite a bit more.
We could, Gray, and you might have to help me with the notes more on that one, because that'll be more of your expertise than mine. But they put compared to other countries anyway, they put in the most by a good chunk anyway. But now they're obviously relying's the wrong word, but relying doesn't mean that they're stupid. They are relying, get more assistance from the public sector, and they should, because we work best when we combine our expertise. And they've obviously seen that SpaceX are ahead of the game by a country mile. That's why they're giving them all these multi-billion-dollar contracts, because they know they're the guys that will get them to the moon, get them to the Mars, and they'll work together. So I love to see it. Could SpaceX have done it without NASA's help? Probably, but it might have taken them longer. I think that's maybe a fair thing to say. So, yeah, NASA's a great example of that. Gray's a big advocate for that. Of course he is. He likes space travel and all that stuff. So do I. You like it even more than I do, Gray. In fact, if you come along to our Discord channel, we said we had a room in there each. We do. Gray, well, I actually put it in because I think Gray wanted it. A space and science channel. So you could come in there and all the geeky stuff. I mean, Gray sees something shiny in the sky and he puts a post in about it. Oh, shiny, see that quasar? Okay, right. I don't go that far. I don't go that far.
Hey, look, science is just fascinating, and I think for a lot of people in it. And it also keeps your mind off the the dumb things going on in life. So that helps, as well.
That's true. You get depressing things in life, and sometimes that's part of the whole thing we get to later on in our episode, that why Gene Roddenberry invented Star Trek. And we'll end in that because that's possibly the best way to sum up why we love Star Trek and what it's all really about. As we know, Gray, many people in science and engineering have went into the respective industries and jobs because of Star Trek, whether it's directly or indirectly.
And they still do.
Yeah, they still do. Yeah, it's not like a one-off thing.
They still mention Star Trek, even though they're they weren't around for some of the original stuff, but they still think about it. They still say it was an influence in some way or other.
Yeah, 100%. I can't think Star Wars didn't do that. I don't recall anyone ever getting into those fields because like little green dudes and like glowy bloody laser sticks and stuff. I don't. Yeah, they didn't. They probably enjoy it, but I don't think they get into their jobs for that reason. So, that shows inspire people to keep going into their roles, their careers, and keep pushing the boundaries of science and what's actually possible. And Gray's mentioned here the late, brilliant, amazing Nichelle Nichols dedicated considerable time working the PR for NASA. I forgot about that one, Gray, but I do recall that she was a big advocate of space travel and NASA, wasn't she? She would do PR for them on quite a regular basis.
Sure.
I haven't read any articles she done on this or like seen any commercials or spots and stuff. What kind of stuff did she do? What did she
do? Really didn't do that many, commercials or articles per se. It was just her presence. She went around talking about it, and many times when she's gone to college campuses and whatnot, she would talk about it. And so just through her talking about it and had people that wanted to get into the field or get into science and stuff. So she was a big influence, and some of the other cast members too, but especially her. She was a big influence on the young to be able to want to, reach for the stars and do something different, or exciting with their life, and it made a difference.
Yeah. I don't recall too many Star Trek actors actually doing that, to be fair. I think, well, some of them love Star Trek. I don't think they all necessarily love NASA and space travel and all that stuff. It doesn't go hand in hand, unfortunately. But Nichelle was a big advocate of that. When it comes to Star Trek in general, as cheesy and sad as this might sound, it basically inspires. I'm going to say us, Greg, because we think similar in this respect. It inspires us to do more, achieve more, explore. In fact, we're explorers by nature, human beings. To boldly go, blah blah blah. All that good stuff. I think of the whole moral of Star Trek, and I'm a glass half full guy, Gray. I think you are too. Bad things happen to us in life, but when I think of what Star Trek actually tries to teach us, that everyone's equal and fair and there's no war and famine and stuff anymore, that's one of the reasons I love it. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I love Pew Pew. I love a good Pew Pew. Brilliant. That's why I love the Defiant, because it's the best at the Pew Pew. But the Defiant and Enterprise A, no, that's not a fair fight, is it? I would.
An E.
Well, the E, see, that would be interesting because the E is very maneuverable, but the Defiant's more maneuverable, but it's a lot smaller. So yeah, we could have Starship off.
And if you want to know more about that, look at our past videos.
Yeah.
You'll see a whole discussion on that. We did it all.
Great. What was Gene Roddenberry's vision? You could say for Star Trek or just in general, and like, because they kind of are, they're similar and they match up. What was his vision then?
Well, he was always optimistic that that mankind would eventually get a lot wiser over time. That's debatable, right now, but that's only because we go through cyclical patterns as human beings where we constantly get smarter and then stupider
at the same time sometimes.
Yeah, so we may be on a more of a stupid trend lately, but the point is that he always had the positive outlook on what could end up happening. And despite that, the point of the matter was that yes, it was a positive outlook on the entire Earth and the peoples of Earth, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be Pollyanna and figure you're going to go exploring and never run into problems. No, that's why the Klingons came along and the Romulans and everything else. So it became just a much wider world or universe. But that was his point. He says, well, there won't be this problem anymore. There won't be a famine. We won't need money anymore or whatever. Things will be done freely. We all get along because we're definitely all the same in many ways, et cetera, et cetera. And in the 60s, especially the late 60s, this was like, oh man, what a concept. It's like that can't really happen, but it did. And they broke a lot of ground on that ship with all kinds of different things. And so people were just kind of like, oh, and then so even today, people still look at it as being, in the positive vein, and that this is all possible, that could possibly happen. So it was always that way. And it was good.
Yeah.
And he, and despite, maybe later in his life where, he wasn't as prolific or maybe some of his ideas are starting to wear out. It doesn't matter. He created it and he did well with it for quite a while. And that's all that counts. If he hadn't come up with it, we wouldn't have it now.
It'd be interesting to see what we would have now if that wasn't a thing. It could be some bastard version of Star Trek. Star Wars, sorry.
No.
Could be anything. But yeah, it makes it sound like I hate Star Wars. I don't.
Well, it's also Star Trek kind of paved the way for other more science-based to a great extent, different shows. What comes to mind right, is like some of the latest stuff. I'm losing now. It's track. What the show
Babylon
I can't
5?
think of now. No, Babylon 5 for sure, because that was something that the creator of Babylon 5 said, "Hey, look, I couldn't do what I'm doing if it wasn't for Trek laying the groundwork." And that's exactly what he did. And so now, whenever a show like this comes along, that tends to be a little more, I hate to use this word, but it makes sense, more cerebral. So you have to kind of think on it. A more involved show, a better written show, a better.
It's X-Men, isn't it? No.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like shows like Foundation that Apple's putting on. This is a show where it's a great show, but you have to think though. You have to sit there and see what's going on, on it and stuff. And other shows too have been popping up here and there like that. I'd much rather. I'm not saying that there isn't room for a fantasy-based show, like a Star Wars, but like we said before, it's more fantasy than real true sci-fi.
Yeah.
But when you get into a real true sci-fi show, then you're talking, now you get your cake and you can eat it too, which is great. And I want to see more of it. And Apple's done a good job of some of this stuff, so I'm really kind of hoping that trend tends to continue.
Some of the shows we wouldn't have got away with today if it wasn't for Star Trek, like Farscape. If you ever seen that, that is batshit crazy sci-fi. That generally is absolutely bonkers. That show. There was a show back in the day called Lex. I don't know if it's LEX or LEX. That was basically that was soft core porn sci-fi is the best way I could describe that, man. It was like this little floating, this little mechanical head thing that was obsessed with women. Like, I mean, honestly, it was absolutely bonkers, that show, but I loved it dearly. So yeah, Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future was that we're all better, we're all equal and whatnot. I like the whole thing that, Gray, that we don't, in the future we don't have money anymore. Well, we have money if we want to deal with the Ferengi, because they're still money grabbing, greedy so and so's, but we don't have money for the most part. The principle being, the fishmonger will give fish to the baker for some bread, and vice versa. The guy in the bakery will give some bread to the fishmonger in exchange. We don't need money. We exchange things with each other, so because money shouldn't be required. And I won't get too deep in this one, but the point I was putting down was, I want that to happen one day, and there'll be some form of it one day. However, I can't see it being anytime soon, because Gray hit the nail on the head. Human beings can be absolutely wonderful things sometimes, but collectively as a species, I reckon we're still basically selfish and greedy. And I'm not saying I am and he is and you are and you are. I'm saying collectively together, a lot of people are still driven by money and ambition. Ambition's not a bad thing, but money. You see people walking past, homeless people and stuff in the street, and not giving a shit. We're a lot better than we used to be. Credit where credit's due. But we've got a long way still to go. And should we be that far out in the stars, Gray, at this moment? Even if we could, probably not. I don't think we've matured yet enough as a species yet to be any further than Mars, say, for example. But one day we'll get there, because I'm a glass half full guy, like I say. So
it'll take some time, but like I said, you can't take a hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and just breed it out of you. Some of the stuff is there, and you have to learn how to control it and do the right thing. I mean, it's easy to say, you should do no harm, and you should be at least acknowledge the fact that everybody has their given rights, et cetera, et cetera. But hey, look, it's been going on for thousands of years on this planet. So there's always a problem. They always start a war over something. You got to have something to look optimistically to, and that's what Star Trek always was. It was something to look forward to. That it could be this way, or it could be that way. The other show I was trying to think of was The Expanse. That's another.
That's realistic. Star Trek in a few hundred years will be there.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, that's probably even more likely in that, as far as what could happen down the line. And stuff. So who knows? It's good. We got God willing, we got millions of years left, or we'll say thousands. I don't want to get into the millions part.
Things were obviously worse back in the 50s and 60s, right? So when Gray was watching Star Trek in the 60s, he's around about 10 years old or so. And things were worse back then in terms of racial divides and segregation and whatnot. The first, second, third class. And I'm not just saying America, I'm pretty much talking about anywhere in the developed first world. So things were worse then, they are better now. Star Trek was ahead of its time for many aspects. Obviously, the big one that comes to mind was the interracial kiss with William Shatner and Nichelle Nichols. And if you look back then, Nichelle Nichols was a nice looking girl. And we know Gray in interviews he's done with these people likes flirting with the female Star Trek cast. Michelle Forbes is one. It's possibly why, because Nichelle another. But we don't mind. We don't mind. She was a beautiful girl, a beautiful woman. So you saw that there was black cast members. It was normal. There was a Russian on board. He wasn't Russian, but the character was Russian. I don't recall them. Tell me if I'm wrong, Gray. Back in the TOS era, I don't think there was. There certainly wasn't transgender characters, but I don't think there was gay characters either. That came later, if I'm right in saying.
Right. It's not that Gene Roddenberry didn't want to.
It was too much at once for the studios.
When you start going back to the network people, he's lucky he got away with what he did.
Yeah, he really did.
Let alone
they didn't want Spock with pointy ears, which was nothing wrong, but that's how we thought back then.
Man. Just to show you how old some of that thinking was, they had too many people who were complaining that he looks like the devil, and you can't have him on there. Pointy ears, that's the devil. Can't work. Can't do it. And so they had to really fight to get the character to stay the way he was with the ears. So now you look back at it and go like, well, that's pretty damn silly, but.
Yeah.
Back then it wasn't. So,
yeah.
And the cool thing about sci-fi back then, and somewhat in today, but much more back then, is that you could, because the studio executives didn't really understand science fiction, Roddenberry was able to weave in all the different things that were happening in life around that time into his stories. And because it was a science fiction story, they just looked at it and went like, yeah, okay. And they just let it go.
Very smart
And
like
so
that.
he got right. So he got away with a lot of stuff,
Uh,
and a lot of coming up with all kinds of different things that were in controversies back then, all woven into his stories.
Remember the TOS episode where Spock and you know the name of the episodes better than I. Spock and Shatner went back in time, and they were in an American neighborhood, and they were disgusted that people were sleeping on the streets, and there was racial divides and stuff. Remember that? And the woman gets hit by a car. Should we intervene and save her? I don't recall the name of that episode. Do you?
City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah. So there you go. One of the classics of all time. That's a perfect example of what Gray was just discussing. Yeah. That was happening, and still to an extent today happens. Sure. And they covered that, and they were like, oh, and then there was Deep Space Nine episodes where they went back in time, similar, Sisko and Bashir, and they're like, oh, this was normal back in the day, racial divide and stuff, and they kind of were, Bashir was just like, that's kind of not logical, it doesn't make sense, but bringing things that are happening around, still doesn't, of course it doesn't, no, but they kind of tried to make fun of it, like people are dumb and stupid sometimes, and of course they can be. So later on in Star Trek, we get it's not, Star Trek has not got properly woke yet, and I hope it doesn't, but it got close. In Discovery, there was we had gay transgender characters, not a first, but a first for Star Trek. There was probably gay characters before that, but certainly I don't recall a transgender character until then. And I had no problems with that at all. I thought they were good characters, especially Stamets and I can't remember the Doctor. I thought they were a sweet couple, Gray. Those two worked really well together as a couple. The transgender character, they worked. I mean, it was a transgender person and a character. I think it's difficult to ask a straight person to play a transgender character when they've not been through that themselves. So to actually bring someone in with the expertise and the knowledge, and it was difficult. This person wasn't acting so much, it was almost, they were feeling the emotion of the prejudice against them in the episodes in Discovery. So we have a very famous person everyone knows, Martin Luther King. He was once quoted as saying to Nichelle Nichols, I quote, "Whether you like it or not, you have become a symbol," end quote. Now, that's a popular sentence, a quote there, Gray. He convinced her to stay in Star Trek because I believe at some point she wasn't ultra fussed about coming back. But I think with her help and other people's help, he was like, whether you like it or not, you're a symbol, you're an icon. You have managed to bridge that divide ever so slightly. You have to stay in. And when Martin Luther King, especially if you are a black actress and one of the most famous black guys that's ever lived comes to you and says, stay in it, you're an icon to people that are different from anyone else, you listen. And she stayed in Star Trek, thank God, because then Gray couldn't have had his
interview,
chat up interview with her. He was flirting, so he was. So we're getting closer to the end. We have several Star Trek actors, past and present, Gray. I didn't know this, but it makes sense, that have endorsed the Planetary Society, which is more of a recent thing. But I love the concept of it. They were very proud to do so. I'd listened to several of their interviews last night when I was doing some notes for this. And some of the famous names were, of course, Nichelle Nichols, because she was one of the biggest ones. Jonathan Frakes, John Delancey, Kate Mulgrew. She's very passionate about it, just to name a few. And your man, Bob Picardo, is a board member who, this is going to be controversial. I love Defrost Kelly to bits. I do. Bob Picardo has always been my favourite Doctor because of his dry sense of humour. He borrowed heavily from Bones. Of course he did. Yeah. He did. He borrowed heavily from Bones, but I just loved how he was very dry and cheeky, even more so than DeForest Kelley. And he's a board member, so that kind of says it all. And then, of course, we're not forgetting Shatner went to space as well. So there's
Yeah.
another link there as well. You saw the look in the guy's face. Remember after when he came back, great.
Yeah, he was like stunned.
What was his name? Who was it? It's Jeff Bezos. He gave him a hug, and he almost wouldn't shut up to the point. I think Jeff Bezos was like, "Oh, please, please, just stop, go away, stop hugging me, man. You're going on about it for 5 minutes, how meaningful and deep it was." But could you imagine, great? See if someone said to you, "You could go up in that ship tomorrow." Of course, you're probably going to be safe, but there's always a small chance compared to say an airplane that something goes wrong. Or if they said you want to go to the moon or something, maybe not Mars yet, would you say yes? I would sign up because you will never get an opportunity again, mate.
I mean, because it was short, yes, but at least you had the experience of it happening. And I think it was, it was just so impressive to Shatner. That's why he was just dumbstruck, because he was already back down on the ground. It was only like a few minutes ago he was in space.
It's when you see it, it's when you see the Earth for the first time. Every astronaut said it. It is the most awe-inspiring thing you'll ever see in your life.
I think it even goes all, way back to Apollo 8. When Apollo 8 went around the moon, we had never seen our planet from the moon before. And that first shot was very famous. Now, since then, I don't know if anybody's been following or into it, but the Artemis space program, which is getting back to the moon, there's a couple of pictures I have that I even use on my desktop. And one of them was a great shot of Artemis as it was coming around on a high orbit in the back of the moon. And when it shot towards the Earth, you saw the moon and the Earth floating there in space. But they were pretty good size because it wasn't that far away. It's like an astonishing shot. And that was not CGI or an old clip from Star Trek. Wow. This was real stuff. And it was just like, whoa. And when you get a look at it, you just find out, how small you are in the whole universe. It's like crazy.
Part of me thinks, great, if you gave everyone the chance to go up to space, the majority of them would come back and the human race would not overnight, but almost overnight, improve and change so much more because they would see what's at stake. They would be so sometimes when you see something so beautiful, it actually brings you to tears sometimes. Actually, I don't want to delve too much in this one, but my mother recently went with her friend travelling around some of the north of Scotland, which I'm going to be biased, of course. Some of the country where I stay, the Highlands, is absolutely stunning sometimes. You've heard of Skye, the Isle of Skye, Gray, famous kind of place. She went there and she said some of the beauty I saw actually brought me to tears. And that's kind of maybe the same idea when you see the Earth from space. It's the most stunning thing, and then it makes you realise of what it's the only home we've got. And I don't blame Elon Musk for then trying to find us another home, because we kind of are good at shitting on our own doorstep, if the want of a better phrase. We kind of are. So yeah, several TV shows and movies, great, have been influenced by Star Trek. Of course they have. We touched on that earlier on. We talked Galaxy Quest was a great example, because I can just imagine some aliens right now watching our podcast or watching Star Trek and going, right, okay, let's actually make this Enterprise, and then it's come and get Shatner, maybe not Shatner, maybe like Frakes and Picard and whatnot, Kate Mulgrew, whoever, to come and go on ship and try and do their thing, and then be told that, no, I'm sorry, we're actors, it's not really real. Red Dwarf, great example. I know most of you probably know what Red Dwarf is. True story. Patrick Stewart was watching this show when it first came out, and at the start he was appalled because they were literally ripping the piss out of his show. They were taking the piss out of The Next Generation. He was about to call his agent to actually get a complaint put in to get this show stopped or whatever, but he watched it a little bit longer and he was howling in tears by the end of it. He went, okay, I was jumping the gun a little bit. This is genius. And it is. It's the funniest sci-fi show I've ever seen, and there's several of them. It is comic genius, that show really is. The Orville is a massive example of that. Seth MacFarlane, massive Trekkie. It's basically more serious, but yet still funny version of Star Trek. Many things are similar. Great. Gray loves that show. I love that show. Gray loves it a little bit more.
And a lot of people say the Orville is more Star Trek than some Star Trek out there.
What?
So which is interesting, especially maybe more in the third season or second season. But I mean, you obviously, and the funny thing is when MacFarlane brought that Orville, he flat out said, "I'm patterning this right at Star Trek." He didn't make any bones about it. He just sat there and went like, this is going to be made because of my love of Star Trek, and it's going to have a lot of the same things and values that I saw in Star
And I'm
Trek.
not ashamed to say so.
Exactly. And a lot of people thought he was nuts when he said that because they're going to go like, oh, yeah, now no one's going to watch it. But it ended up being a big hit for the 3 seasons it went.
Yeah, hopefully we
And
get one more.
there's constantly rumors that there'll be a 4th season someday.
No, I doubt it, man.
Even McFarlane came out recently and said that he's not closing the doors at all.
Yeah, but he will hardly be in the show because he's so busy. There's the problem. And without him mostly in it, it's kind of, I don't see the point. But hey,
you know what? He's not an old guy, so it could pop up.
He could later on. You're right.
I don't know.
The other example, the last example I had down here was Mork and Mindy.
That's
what was
cool.
it? Nanu. Was it like
Nanu? Yeah.
Nanu. Mark, Colin, Mindy. Come in, Mindy. Genius.
That's a stretch, but yeah.
Robin Williams, rest in peace, my friend. Comic genius as well. Many famous people have been inspired by Star Trek. A lot of celebrities and whatnot have loved Star Trek. They include, obviously, Martin Luther King, who we discussed. Elvis Presley with 1 S, not 2. So Gray tells me. Frank Sinatra. Didn't know he was a Trekkie. That's cool. He did it his way. Stephen Hawking, of course. Of course, Stephen Hawking would be there are probably far more scientists that were Star Trek fans, but he's one of the biggest of all time. And he actually played himself in The Next Generation. I remember that. That was
it was
weird.
A cool episode. It was a holograph that had all the great minds of the last whatever. So they had real people or real figures played by actors. And then they had Stephen Hawking playing himself. And then they also had like some that we haven't heard of.
And Data was talking science with him or something, I'm sure, at one point. It was fascinating to watch.
Something like that, yeah.
Brilliant.
It was great. It was nice that they were able to honor him, and he thought it was great. So he wanted to be in it. So it all worked out.
Oh, yeah, he's a Trekkie. I can totally understand why. And then a slightly different tangent here. In 1985, the Klingon Dictionary was brought out. Now, mainly to help actors and writers learn the language and actually write something that made sense. But it became a proper language at that point because there was all the key things you need for a language, including, of course, the said dictionary at the end as well. I think that was... I may be wrong here, guys. Tell me if I am. I think that's the first of its kind where a language was literally invented and then a dictionary made based on it. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Yeah, I don't believe so either. But even if there was something, nothing got its own dictionary and got put into the normal run of So that was the first time. And then people started taking it seriously. There's people out there that speak Klingon.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course they'll know it fluently.
They looked at the dictionary, they figured it out, and they do it. It's a whole linguistic thing. I mean, you can nowadays a good linguistic can make up any kind of language if he wants to, if he knows how to do it.
There is key things. Don't ask me what they are. There are certain key attributes you need for some words to be a language. You know, they need to have so many vowels, syntax, all that good stuff. Certain various factors before it's classed as a language. Klingon has it. Not just the fact there's the dictionary for it, it does have it, which is absolutely batshit crazy bonkers. I love it. I'm so proud. I do not have the Klingon dictionary. I have the Star Trek encyclopedia, the more recent one they done.
I remember that.
Goes to the end.
I remember the book, and I remember when they put it on CD.
Yeah, but Gray, I've got the up to date extended one. I've got the one that goes to the end of Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise, which is cool because Star Trek after that was never as good after that. So, I've got the cool stuff that's got Voyager and all that in there, which is great. And the last interesting fact I had down here was in 1986, music was influenced by Star Trek as well. There was a British band that named itself T'Pol after a character from TOS Season 2, the one and only Amok Time. And that actress...
I didn't even know that. I'm sitting there going like, what?
Yeah, I know that. I could picture the actresses, the character she's playing, the Vulcan in that, and she's just like a hard ass. Like, she almost looks like a Time Lord. Like, she just does not crack a smile. She's just very staunch. So yeah, listen, we're going to kind of wrap up there. This could have got a lot deeper than it was, but we just wanted to actually try and bring some justice to Star Trek's effect in society, really. Of course, we may come back with another special before season 5 Discovery starts, possibly, or maybe I'll do a live show and I'll play one of the Star Trek games or something. Gray can come in and nag me and talk to me. He's been wanting to do that. So.
I still gotta play Resurgent.
Yeah, I've got it. I got it a lot cheaper though, Gray. That's why I got it again. And it's been improved. So yeah, guys, if you've got any comments or ideas of special subjects to discuss in Star Trek you want us to talk about, mark them below and like thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like it. Until the next time, Gray, do your thing, please, sir.
Live long and prosper, everybody.
Thanks, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.